Hello everybody, I wanted to talk about one of my favorite cores today, and that is the Furina Bennett Gene core. I think it's a very good core, and for pretty much any attack scaler it's going to be good. So let's take a look at Gene. Now, I have a fair amount of energy recharge on her and some crit rate, as you can see. That's because I'm running Favonius. Um, the set, I don't have the most ideal set for her, but ideally she wants attack percent, crit rate for Favonius. If you weren't using Favonius, you could use attack or healing bonus. I do have her Constellation 2. Her cons aren't crazy, but they do give some value. I have my attack leveled up because I have on-fielded her a little bit. You could level up your burst as much as you need to on her. Her skill doesn't really need any leveling. And then we're going to take a look at Bennett. Bennett is running a fair amount of energy recharge just so he can burst on cooldown, just like Gene. And his base attack is 799. That's because I'm running the Skyward Pride. Has a fair amount of energy recharge too. I could get more energy recharge. He's technically not fully built. I could optimize a little bit more with my circlet, but he has enough energy recharge and HP to make the build flow. And the circlet is more or less just a holding piece. It has enough to get the 250, so I'm chilling there, but it could be HP there or healing bonus if needed as well, but with Gene and the team, healing bonus isn't necessarily needed. C6, and there is 1-6-13 on talents, which is pretty nice, especially the burst because that lets him burst on a cooldown. For Furina, I have fairly optimized build on her. I don't like running her on her 4-piece, as you'll see in a second, but I have her on her signature 2-piece, 2-piece. This is what works best for me, but for most people, the best is probably going to be a mix of energy recharge and skill damage, or energy recharge and hydro damage. I do have her Constellation 6, which works very well in a lot of teams. You don't need to have Constellation 6 for this team to work. As you can see, I do have her talents maxed out too, but you do not need her to be maxed out. In the clip I'm going to show here in a second, you're going to see me play Furina as if she wasn't Constellation 6, because the biggest difference between Constellation 0 and Constellation 6, besides the buffing from Constellation 1 and 2, and the energy recharge from Constellation 4, is that the attacks will heal you if you're in the skill damage part of her kit. So I'm about to upload that right now and show you guys, as you're about to see. This is a clip with Yoimiya. She's an attack scaler. Take advantage of the Bennett C6 and the attack speed from Gene and the buff from Furina. I'm not using the Furina Constellation 6 here. Unfortunately, I can't take away the energy recharge that I'm getting or the extra damage from the talents. But if we're just taking a look at what is going on Yoimiya's side, we'll see the damage that she's doing. And yes, Furina's doing damage, but I don't think you want to see me take off all my pieces on Furina just so I don't do any damage. And you will see we take out this fairly fast, and we're meeting the elemental checks here, of course, too. But if theoretically you need to deal with a certain elemental check, all you have to change is whatever DPS you want to run to take out that elemental check. And as you can see here in just a second, Yoimiya is going to take out this guy. And that is the most basic part of this core. But now we are going to get into the build my Yoimiya used. Now it's fairly straightforward. At the end of the day, Yoimiya doesn't need energy recharge. So we have a fair amount of crit chance and crit damage here. I don't really have that much EM, so instead, if you're worried about crit ratios, just focus on EM instead of crit rate or crit damage. It's not the biggest difference in the world. I am getting EM from Bennett's instructors, so that balances things out. 4-piece Shimenawas is always going to be good. You can run her on a couple of different sets as long as she can make use of the damage from her normal attacks. She'll be fine. Doesn't really need her burst. Her passive talents are fairly straightforward, buffing her normals. And that's pretty much the Yoimiya version. Now we're going to go straight into another build, which is, I called it Furry National. And pretty much we're going to take a look at Xiangling over here. Again, same thing as some of the other characters that you may or may not have seen. The most important thing for any team core is to make sure that you have enough energy recharge to try to burst on cooldown. I have 252% catch. I am running 4-piece emblem. Doesn't need to be the craziest pieces. As long as you have the ER substat, you're good. She likes elemental mastery and damage, as most of you guys probably already well know by now. And I do have her Constellation 6. C4 is the most impactful one, given some duration. And C6 is good if you were using somebody else as a pyro buffer, but that's not going to be the case. We have talent that's the most invested is the burst, because that's going to be where we're going to get the damage. You could focus on the passive talent, but it's 10% diminishing returns with Bennett. It's not that important. So now we're going to do a little bit of showcase where I'm going to talk with you guys about the Xiangling version. So pretty much this is going to be it. I'm not going to be normal attacking or anything in my combos. I do have C6, so I could be normal attacking to try to make Furina be the one to vape more than what she's already vaping in some circumstances, because Xiangling has no ICD. However, I'm just going to stand there. Hopefully this makes up a little bit for the constellation difference here. I'm just standing here, kind of letting the whole team do their work. I could be on-fielding as Jean if I didn't have enough healing, or using Bennett's skill in between to generate more particles for the team. It's a very flexible team with a lot of downtime, as you see. I would say a fair amount of this team's duration is just downtime. I'm just standing there looking at the enemy. I could be trying to get my burst up more, switching to different characters, using their skills more frequently. However, I'm just showing you at its core how simple this version is. It's very national, as you can see. It's very straightforward. It gets about the same clear time as well, and it's a free-to-play character that you get at the beginning of the game. So I'm going to show you a different team that uses the exact same core, which is Faruzan Hyper. It's very straightforward. This team actually goes very good with Jean's constellations as well, because her Constellation 4 decreases animo resistance by 40%. With Faruzan being maxed out would be a total of 76% animo resistance decrease, which is very good for Faruzan's damage. And Faruzan is actually going to be doing a fair amount of damage with her Constellation 6, as you'll see in a second. So it's technically 75 over 205. Slingshot is a very good weapon, especially with diminishing returns on Bennett. You don't need pay to win options, as people would say. It is a very straightforward, any weapon that has good substats or passives you can make use of. The set is, I'm using two-piece, not the greatest circlet out of all the other pieces. It's very straightforward. Her constellations are very good. If you can get her constellations, they're good. If not, where I have Faruzan in place, you could use any Animo Hypercarry that has come out or will ever come out. Or if you want to turn somebody into an Animo Hypercarry, you could do it with a team like this. Especially with Bennett C6, you could take advantage and turn them into a Pyro DPS as well with this team. It's a very flexible team. So Animo will not be losing out. The talents are good. You decrease Animo resistance, and you get to make use of your own passive talents in this team. And we're about to show that right now in this little showcase, where Faruzan's going to get her time to shine. So we're doing the same combos we've been doing this whole time. We make use of the instructors, Viridescent. Theoretically, you could even have Furina on Tenacity as well, if you're really just trying to see the on-fielders numbers over everybody else. Faruzan is going to make pretty easy work of most of these enemies. Her autos are going to hit high. If you wanted a more lazy version of this particular character, you can also make use of Golden Troop. That 4-piece is really nice with that 800% on burst and with the skill damage. There's not a lot of characters that can make use of skill damage in both their skill and burst, but Faruzan can. So if you don't want to do as much on-fielding as I am, and you want it to be more like that Xiangling Showcase, you could swap over to Golden Troop or whatever works best for you. I mean, the energy recharge requirements, you're able to take out the enemy. It's going to be pretty straightforward. And yeah, we're going to do one more little rotation. We're going to swap over to Faruzan, do, I think it's like 2 autos, and then yeah, it's going to be over before he hits the ground again. So now we're going to go into the next team, which is Elisa Hypercarry. It's a very simple, straightforward team. You could technically do the rotation a little bit different if you wanted to. However, for the video's sake, I'm going to try to keep the rotation the same as I have with the previous characters. So we're going to go over Lisa. I have decent stats on her, would like to have more crit rate, would like to be on a 4-piece. Currently I'm on a 2-piece. I actually ended up using Widsith for this showcase, but you could also use sack frags or a number of weapons as well. I got the Electro Goblet from rolling in the artifact selector. I just started farming out this set, so I actually don't have a lot of pieces of it yet. Ideally, it would be nice to have that 4-piece. I have C1, which just means a little bit easier on energy. Still not the greatest energy recharge that I have. Would be nice to have more of that. Maybe like 150 would be nice for a team like this. 699 is good talents. Would be nice to potentially go up to 999 or 91212 because she can make use of everything in her kit, including the defense shred that she gets on her burst, so you always want to have her burst up. Lisa is very straightforward. You could play her off field as well. If you played her off field, I would say maybe aim for like 200 to 220% energy recharge. She can use her skill at the beginning to get her particles back faster, or you could try to build up an attack to get all 3 particles, which in some rotations is actually going to end up being a net loss for your damage, considering that she's doing electro on all of her hits. So if you're going to be taking use of her kit, you might sub out using her most optimal damage because you're actually losing it on DPS. So I usually just use the skill as soon as I get it on cooldown, just so that I can go back to doing some charged or normals, whatever I feel is better for the circumstance. If you need to dodge some attacks in this case, you could use normals. If you're not dodging as much, you could use charges. They have a bigger number. It's going to be an easier crit to hit. And yeah, I mean, it's the same combo. You have this nice little core that heals your team, regenerates everybody up, and then you could just use whatever DPS you want. Even if the DPS wasn't the greatest, as long as it's doing something and it's attack scaling, you're going to be able to make use of it with this core. Up next we have Rosaria, who is a very flexible cryo attack scaling unit. She is fairly straightforward to play in her kit. If we take a look, my ratio is fairly good considering the Ascension talent that increases her crit rate by 12%. Would be nice to have a little bit more crit rate, but she doesn't necessarily need it. I am on 2-piece, 2-piece. It works best for me. It could be a mix of anything as far as cryo damage, skill damage, burst damage, energy recharge, elemental mastery, attack. I do have C2, which increases the duration. Her other cons past that are okay, but again, they're not really needed. Even if you had her at C0, she would be fine. She would just have a little bit less duration. Her ultimate, I believe it's like 1 to 2 ticks. Her ultimate's the only thing that I really have leveled. Her other abilities are good. Her normals you could level if you were on fielding and trying to auto attack. In the showcase you're going to see in a minute, I don't choose to auto attack, but that's only because it's not needed. Again, like the Xiangling one, I want you guys to see how easy and flawless this team comp can run. You don't need to auto attack in this comp. You can sit there, you can fill this in with any sort of rotation. If you're running low on energy, you could swap between characters, even if you didn't meet the requirements, or if you were trying to squeeze in extra damage or change the way that the application of the elements was going to resolve, you could do that as well. It's technically a mix of freezing and melting, which is nice. Either the Sunfire from Jean is going to be taking over and be doing melt, or Rosaria or Furina are going to be the one taking the vapes. Regardless, you're going to have damage, you're going to have some form of crowd control, and it's just a very easy comp for a cryo character to run into. It's not much to it. She is giving crit rates to the team, so if you did decide to use this particular attack scaling cryo character, you would have less crit needs to worry about. But besides that, it's a fairly straightforward run. Easy to use. You stand in the circle when you use your abilities, and then you just stand there and you wait for the enemy to die. Alrighty. Now we have double vape Xinqiu. The idea behind this is pretty simple. Bennett is C6, so when I auto attack, I am going to be getting extra vapes. The order of the vapes doesn't really matter because instructor from Bennett is being passed on to everybody. Xinqiu has not really the greatest crit stats, but he does have the 220% ER needs with sac needed to basically guarantee his burst will come back on cooldown. As you see, the pieces are good, but they're not optimized yet. C0, his cons are very good. Decreases resistance, increases elemental application, and I think he gets a little bit of healing and stuff in his kit too. But again, not needed for this. He is just an attack scaling Hydro, who in this case needs to auto attack in order to use their elemental burst. So we are going to be taking advantage of the C6 here because his kit revolves around him auto attacking. If you don't have C6, that's fine. It just means the damage is being moved over into Jean doing the elemental mastery over Xinqiu and potentially Furina. It's not a bad thing, the damage is just getting moved. It's not really decreasing all that much. And again, this is a C0 Xinqiu. I know a lot of people have more than C0. I have not gotten more than one copy of him. If this is something you were interested in, you could always pull him in the shop. He comes 2 times a year. The combo is straightforward. You attack with your autos to proc his burst after doing everybody else, and you'll just be vaping. It doesn't matter which way you vape. If you want to pay attention to which way you vape, more to you, but it really doesn't matter unless you're doing an elemental check, of which you would already be doing the elemental check regardless of the damage. Alrighty. For Dendro, we have the Dendro Traveler, of which you can freely get as soon as you go to Smeru and use your Traveler to talk to the Statue of the Seven. Any attack scaler would do. Dendro Traveler is fairly easy to build as well. You need to meet about 200% energy recharge, ideally. A little bit less, a little bit more is fine. I'm using Sapwood, of which you could use Favonius or Sacrificial. Any weapon that gives energy recharge would be good, or if you hit the energy recharge, feel free to meet EM or crit or attack. Those all work fine. You can get Constellation 6 for free, of which Constellation 6 increases elemental damage by 12%. Most important talents to level are Skill and Burst. Level up autos as you want. If you have C6 Bennett, which again is not necessary in any of these teams, I will try not to auto attack in this clip to not take advantage of the C6, but if you want to, you can. It's just going to give you more damage throughout the rotation. This combo is fairly simple. Technically, what you're doing is burgeoning. If you want, you can try to turn it into a burn vape, but burgeoning is usually what ends up happening. Burgeoning and then vaping, you don't really see too much burning. If you do, it's a little bit. It's not something you really need to think too hard about. The damage is just going to happen. You will be able to meet the Dendro Elemental check if you come across it, and the enemies will just fall over pretty much, regardless of whatever character you use. You can fill this in with Kale, Tainari, Alhaitham, whoever you want. At the end of the day, you're just getting a huge attack buff. You're able to utilize the Dendro element, which Dendro alone works good unless it was a Cryo check, a Geo check, or potentially an Animo check. Last but not least, I have Noelle. Where I have Noelle, you could have Navia or Ningguang or any attack scaling Geo unit that comes out in the future. I have a fairly decent crit ratio on her, and even though I do have defense, because I'm C6, that defense does turn into offense. If you didn't have C6, you just use attack. Even if you have C6, you can still use attack, that's fine. You just won't be taking as much advantage from the C6. But even without C6, Noelle is still going to perform fine. You scale her on attack. Under Bennett buff, she's going to perform more than fine, as you're going to see in a moment. I do have her triple crowned, and I do have her on defense, which means I'd get a little bit more advantage out of the skill healing, the damage, and the burst, but we already have healing and everything under control, so the main thing I want you guys to focus on in this particular version is how much attack we're actually getting from the whole team together, and that we don't actually need Geo characters, we don't need Geo Resonance. Alrighty, so we are actually still going to be taking advantage of the attack from Noelle, because she scales off of attack. her defense gets converted into attack, but that means that she's still going to benefit from Bennett giving his attack to Noelle. So we want to try to stay in that circle as much as we can while we're attacking. She has fairly long range. If you're nervous about your energy recharge, you can extend the combo. I try to keep the time frames close, so I do swap over to Furina here. But you could extend that combo out for Noelle to try to get her a little bit more particles, or you could do what I do here, and you just use your Favonius Gene or anybody who has some sort of particles and try to give those over to Noelle. Because without Georesonance, the biggest thing that you're lacking is a little bit extra energy to Noelle, because she doesn't actually generate energy here. But even without her generating energy, we're still able to get her burst back and utilize her burst. So it's a very fluent combo, very easy to understand. And the most important thing here is just bursting on cooldown. If you needed to, you could even run ER Sands on her or extra energy recharge in substats. In conclusion, I think that this is the best team that you can aim for if you use attack scaling DPSs. Those DPSs can be on Marashusei because you have Furina on the team. Not needed. If you don't want to use Marashusei, you could again use any of the sets that I showed in the showcase. You could use any set that they're good with, any combination of two pieces. But the fact that this comp flows so smoothly, lets you get vapes and whatever other combo that you want to do and get damage off, and has a lot of off time for its damage, is very good. I nicknamed the Xiangling variant Furry National, but one of the reasons why National is so good at its core in the old days was because there was so much downtime. You met the elemental checks as fast as you needed to, no ICD, and you could flip the units around. So people would do like Child International and a couple of the other teams that have changed throughout the years. But this version, I feel, is a very future-proofed version of this team for any attack scaler. Because you get huge amounts of attack, you get swirling to decrease resistance, you get a lot of healing, way more healing than you need. Even if Bennett wasn't a healer, you'd have enough healing from Jean. If you didn't, you just need to level up her talent a little bit more. And then you have Furina, who is a buffer. If theoretically this team were to wear off, you could always go after like Jean Constellation 4 if you are on Faruzan. Or you could try to go for cons on your DPS. Not that I can even think in the future that going for cons is even going to be necessary, but it is an option that you can go for. But this core is so strong that any DPS that you enjoy, that you invest, whether it be vertical or horizontal investment, you can take advantage of. And it also gives a good idea of a core if you ever get Imaginarium Theater. You see any combination of these characters for your attack scalers, you can see just the value that they're going to be bringing to the team. If you guys have any questions, concerns, comments, I would love for you to leave them down below. This is my first long form video for Genshin. I would like to make more of these types of videos, but I don't necessarily know all the topics that you guys might want me to cover. If you guys have any questions or interests that you want me to cover down below, please let me know. I've done the Spiral Abyss, I've done the Imaginarium Theater. I don't mind helping anyone and everybody with anything. I love playing Genshin. I love the way that the elemental combat system works. And yeah, I just thought I would cover over with you guys real quick about the probably best core for any attack scaler in the game. So yeah, on that note, I hope you guys have a good one, and peace.